So session 2 is, you see the agenda here. We have 3 online speakers. So firstly, we will have Professor Herbst from the Negotiation Academy Potsdam, part of University of Potsdam, who we have been working with. Maybe there's some of you in the room who've done the 2-day negotiation management course that they run, that we've been doing with them. Then we will hear from Thorsten Ludwig and his colleague from TÜV SÜD on securing loads on car transporters and the rules that are changing this year. So that's quite important. We welcome Sifis from EMSA, the European Maritime Safety Agency. He was lovely, good. And then Peter Weiss finally will be joining us from Detroit for the end of the session. So now we're going to trust once again to the technology, and I hope we're going to introduce Professor Ute Herbst. Ute, do you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, Mike.
Hi, good morning. Lovely to see you again. Welcome. I don't think you see the room, but you have a full room here. I'm so sorry you had a work commitment and couldn't come and join us in person, but I know you wanted to. So the floor is yours, Ute.
Thank you so much, and hello to everybody in the room. My name is Ute, and right in the moment, I'm unfortunately not with you in Malaga, but I'm somewhere in the forest between Germany and Poland. Why am I here? It's really deeply in the forest, if you could look outside, because we have a faculty meeting. And I think our dean didn't want us to escape, yeah? And this is why he brought us here. So here I am, but still, the content is the same, whether I am in Malaga or close in the forest, closed up in the forest. As Mike said, I'm from the University of Potsdam, and actually in my first life, and many of you might know me from these negotiation management courses we were offering. In my first life, I'm just a negotiator, a professor for marketing and sales, but in my second life, I'm focusing on negotiation management, and herefore we founded a co-institute. This is the Negotiation Academy Potsdam, and the Negotiation Academy Potsdam shall bridge the gap between research in the area of negotiations and practical negotiations, because unfortunately throughout whole Europe we don't have any university departments which are focusing on this highly important issue. And what I would like to do with you within the next 20 to 25 minutes is tell you a little bit what is research in the moment doing in this area, why is this important, and maybe what could be a little bit state of the art also for your practical negotiations you are leading every day with your clients, and of course on the other hand also with your suppliers. I think I do have to tell nobody in the room that negotiations are of super high importance for practice. Yeah, everybody is negotiating every day, not only in business but also in private life. But this is not actually why it is so important. It's so important because research found out that if we in our companies only increase our negotiation performance by a very, very slight percent, so approximately 1% is enough in order to steer our profitability by 10 to 20%, because typically, especially in the logistics area, of course, our sales negotiations, they sum up oftentimes to several millions. Interestingly, this has a much higher empowerment actually than many other profitability measures we take. So for example, saving fixed costs or trying to cut variable costs doesn't help far as much. Here we are only around 5 to 7%. So looking upon what our people are doing, especially of course in the sales and procurement department, really pays off in order to help our companies to become more efficient. Interestingly, studies also show that the impact and the importance of negotiation skills in companies are one of the factors that managers, again, especially in the negotiation-related functions as sales and procurement, will be even growing within the next year. So this is a representative survey my institute did itself in the last 2 to 3 years throughout a representative sample in Europe. And we found out that negotiation skills, and you see it highlighted here, will be gaining in importance due to the dynamic of markets, due to the increasing complexity of negotiations we have to lead. Unfortunately, however, negotiations are quite complex. So sometimes it seems to be quite difficult to achieve better negotiation results. Why? If we want to capture it very easily, we can assess a negotiation really like running a marathon in our head. Because on the one hand side, we kind of need to be hobby psychologists to understand what's going on in our negotiation partner's mind. Where is he coming from? What is his line of argumentation? Why is he not open to take over my interests? Is he maybe a little bit incorrect in his statements about costs or budgets or whatever we are negotiating about? Then, of course, every single negotiation situation comprises some kind of conflict, and conflicting issues make with us that we are losing a little bit our rationality, and that sometimes emotions in terms of too early compromises or too early runaways happen in a negotiation. And last but not least, we still negotiate on our own, so we still don't let nego bots take over our 1 million or several billion agreements. And so we have also to be rhetorical and communicatively brilliant. So we have to combine in a negotiation both psychological, analytical, and communicative skills. And this is highly important, and it's kind of hard to learn. And how is this area oftentimes treated in companies? And this is, to my mind, highly interesting from a teaching point of perspective. And as I told you, there are hardly any departments of negotiation. And so what does practice do? Oftentimes you all learn by doing, and we all have learned by doing, yeah? Looking upon colleagues, talking in the floors, checking in the plan, okay, how did you handle such a problem before? We learn by doing, and therewith oftentimes we also learn some false routines, yeah, which are delivered from generation to generation. So for example, hiding away our costs or not being too open, or sticking too much to position, trying not to be too soft. So these are all routines which sometimes might be right, but also oftentimes take us into certain traps. Then also, which comes along with this learning by doing, oftentimes we see a lack of structure. So everybody in the different business units of our companies prepare a little bit differently, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but actually nobody has a clear recipe on how to prepare and how to conduct a negotiation, because we all have a business administration or engineering or whatever background, but definitely not a negotiation background. And what does this lead to? Oftentimes we also lack a knowledge management. This means there's no learning effect, yeah? So it's kind of intuitively giving over from one generation to the next generation in our companies, but oftentimes knowledge about how to lead a negotiation is not stored, so everybody has to learn it all over from the scratch. These problems lead actually to the fact that oftentimes we just leave millions on the floor, yeah? We don't exploit our full negotiation potential. And this is a pity, everybody, because we in research, we know that there are a lot of insights about how to optimally lead a negotiation and how to optimally prepare employees in our companies for negotiations. And there are more or less only, this is always very nice for my students, only two basic streams of research. The one stream is, I would say, we call it the interaction-based research. This is more or less psychology, oftentimes also a little bit cognition science. So where we actually really look upon what do people do in real life negotiations, gather about more than 1,000 samples and try to derive success factors from them. The other stream takes a totally different approach, and this is game theory. And game theory looks upon negotiation problems from a highly strategic and analytical perspective. And many of you might have heard of the prisoner's dilemma, where we just try actually to lead a negotiation like playing chess from a highly strategic, analytical perspective. Both streams, and I couldn't even say the one is more worth for practice than the others. actually we need both in a negotiation, because we still are people, we still need psychology, but of course also we should apply a little bit more strategy and not so much routines and daily behavior into our negotiations. We need both insights for the management of optimal negotiations. However, interestingly, so as you know, I'm coming from business administration and we like to talk to practice, but especially my colleagues in psychology and my colleagues in game theory, to my mind, they are the stereotype professors. They like to remain in their ivory tower. They are brilliant, they are brains, but oftentimes their insights haven't been transferred to practice yet. And this is why practice is a little bit left alone, actually. And this is actually why we founded the Negotiation Academy Potsdam more than 15 years now ago, in order not only to copy and paste and kind of to look up what the colleagues of the other disciplines are doing, but trying to bring it in a structure, trying to bring these insights, which we are finding in psychology and in game theory, and of course what we are adding up by business administration research, by bringing them in a more structurized approach, which can serve as a holistic, I like to call it, recipe to teach practice what they should do before, during, and after a negotiation in order to increase not only the effectiveness of their negotiation outcomes, but also their efficiency. And what we do in research is, on the one hand side, trying to do even more research on how this recipe could work out best. But of course, we also all the time and for more than 15 years, try to validate this recipe as a whole and try to find further areas for improvement. The recipe is a little bit built in several slices, as I like to call it. On the one hand side, you see it's separated into different phases. So the recipe on how to lead an optimal negotiation is structurized on the 5 typical phases a negotiation management process consists of. So first we have to analyze a situation and ask ourselves a little bit, okay, how difficult the game will be. Yeah, is it a complex negotiation? Are we in a very, very poor power position? And what negotiation issues have to be treated? And how are we rated as a supplier in terms of bonus malus in regard to our client and vice versa? Then we have to organize ourselves. We have to set up teams who will be the best negotiation leader. And of course, we also have to analyze the opponent negotiation team. Then we have to prepare in-depth. We have to set SMART goals. SMART goals means we have to have highly ambitious goals, but not overly ambitious goals. However, we shouldn't only take always our walk-away line as a measure to achieve. Then we have to conduct a negotiation. And interestingly, the phase of how to conduct a negotiation only pays off for 10% for your whole negotiation success. So the real success factors really lie in the first prior phases. And then in the very end, and again, highly important, we have to control what we did, but not by means of a SAP or Cooper system, but by means of a in-depth lessons learned session, by asking ourselves, why might we not have achieved our goals? Did we misjudge, for example, our power position? Were our goals too low? Did we step out of our role play? So what happened in a negotiation and what can be done better? And this is why this recipe comes as a circle, as a wheel. What should we do better when we next time try to optimally prepare for a negotiation? You see, the 5 phases are added or are complemented with certain to-dos. This is like the recipe ingredients, which are designed here in the outer layer from the power matrix to the lessons learned. These are the concrete to-dos, the checklist, what people could do when they want to prepare for negotiation, what guides them, what gives them structure, and very important, which also enables companies to derive a general knowledge management on what they in future could do better in their negotiations, and therewith kind of hinders or avoids that people have to learn it all over from the scratch again. To give you some clearer idea what now research is doing in the circle and what research can deliver to practice, I selected 2 tools to introduce to you. and tell you a little bit what our research studies are doing there in the moment. My really favorite and first tool with which I start every training and also every support session when we help people to prepare for their negotiations is the Power Matrix. Power Matrix, as the name says, analyzes the underlying power constellations between negotiation parties. And we are business administration people, like many of you also, and you know, we like easy models, two-dimensional models, and this is also how the Power Matrix is built. The Power Matrix analyzes in how far either the customer or the seller is dependent in a certain negotiation situation. So we have a very easy game if we play from a dominant position, because then actually we are the only ones, if we are negotiating from a selling perspective, we're the only ones our customer can choose from. However, we are in a very difficult negotiation situation if we play it out from the adaptive position, because then our customers can freely choose from several competitors. And it's more or less a tit-for-tat game. Both need both. So a little bit like in a good private marriage, then we are playing in a relationship position if both sides need both. Interestingly now, everybody, for decades, I'd like to say, salespeople were trained to adapt a little bit their behavior to their customer. This is what kind of circulated around also in practical trainings among the word of adaptive selling. And everybody, interestingly, this is totally wrong. We never should adapt to the person on the other side. We always should adapt to our power position. So we should play a little bit more moderate, soft, do more concessions, involve even more perspective-taking ability. This is psychology, so how can we understand the other side when we are in an adaptive position? On the other hand, and I try not to move out of the screen, just like that, on the other hand, we can play a little bit hardball tactics when we are in a dominant position, not like playing unethical, but not being too conciliant. Why? Because the other side definitely needs us. Interestingly, however, and this is what research found out, 30%, and this is to my mind a super high amount, 30% of all practitioners throughout diverse industries either over or underestimate their power position before a negotiation. So they either think they're more dominant or less dominant than they are. This leading to the fact that the strategy they chose is wrong. This leading to the fact that people who are right in their estimation from the very beginning on always achieve significantly better goal achievements than people who kind of misinterpreted their power position. Interestingly, however, the question of in which power we are playing is oftentimes done by practitioners intuitively, but oftentimes we think that our power position remains stable throughout many years in a business relationship. And this is not true, as just the latest situations show us. With Corona, with Ukraine, markets are really dynamic, and competitors, our clients, are coming and fading away. And so every single time we really should check who is here dependent on whom, and how always can we try to both objectively and subjectively change our or improve our power constellation. And here for such a tool not only has been analyzed in research, so what do people do, but has also been kind of or comes also with concrete recommendations for practice, what they should do in regard to in which circle they are playing in, so that people know, don't only live with your power position, but take actions. Take actions before the first meeting with your negotiation partner in order to free yourself a little bit from the dependency position. What's also interesting, especially on the procurement side, everybody, many analyses are in the moment undertaking what is actually being done or what can be done from the buying side in order to improve power. And I know at least 10, 12, 15 large procurement organizations. So oftentimes your negotiation partners which really try to strengthen their power and are asking themselves what are suitable weapons. And interestingly, here just a very new and actual study which has been done in 2019 and 2020 came to the result, actually what we all know, but what is kind of a real pity. The only thing which really pays on the power account is really increasing the number of suppliers. And this is what you see here, right up here. The number of suppliers seems to be the weapon buyers can take in order to increase their power position, and many other things which we oftentimes have been hearing for the last 20 to 30 years in marketing and sales research. Build up relationships, try to come up with trustworthy relationships, install some kind of mutual trust and reliability, you see, are also important, but are way off of the number of suppliers. And this is also what we see from a research perspective, why so many procurement organizations try to increase the number of competitors in every field, not only in logistics. To show you maybe a second tool and to give you a little bit more a concrete feeling of what this recipe looks like. The second step after we recommend people to think about their power situation and how they could or might be able to improve their power position is the question, not how difficult the game will be, but what game actually is being played. And the question of what game is being played is tackled by our next tool, and this is the so-called SMART objective analysis. And SMART objective analysis stands for the idea how many balls actually are in the different stadions we are playing in. So independent of whether we play in the adaptive stadion, in the relationship stadion, or in the dominant stadion, we can only talk about price, or we can claim only price increases, or our contracts and our negotiations can be much more complex, and they can also involve payment terms, payment conditions, emergency concepts, volumes, flexibility on capacities, etc., all the issues you also in your ECG are negotiating about. And because several issues oftentimes make negotiations pretty complex, research is practice is approaching like that they oftentimes negotiate issue by issue, and they reduce complexity by treating issues singular. Therewith, however, everybody, we miss out making smart packages and negotiating in the right agenda, because a smart objective analysis is telling us from the research perspective, on the one hand, where we have to expand our negotiation and maybe even to involve more negotiation issues. What is the concrete order and the agenda of the negotiation issues? Always start from the top. And latest, it also tells us what our first offer should be about and where trade-offs are possible. So this is what you can read from the SMART objective analysis. And you see this is a totally different approach than tackling issue by issue. And oftentimes, because we are also just human beings trying to avoid conflicts, starting with the lowest important ones. So for example, we learned that our first offer has to be made on the issue which is for both sides of highest importance. And we also learned from research that this first offer should not only come as a number, but also should come with a semantic frame, like a starting ramp, what also our legal people use it course. But you should know that. Otherwise, you just start like you always did, give in a written offer and then fight about every point on an individual basis. Last thing, and I have the time in view, of course, I could tell you about every single of these tools and tell you what research is doing with all these single tools. But what might be even more interesting for you, as I said before, this is a structural analytical approach. And what I have not said yet is that the tools, they don't come separately, but they build upon each other. And so depending on the adaptive position, you play the issues differently. You have different goals, and also maybe you apply a different tactic. So this is an inherently connected, a real holistic approach. And you can apply this approach offline, just with your brain, maybe with a paper and pencil. But then oftentimes it's hard for you to do these interlogics, these interconnections between the tools. And this is why for the last 3 to 4 years, research in the area of negotiation management is also working on digital tools, but not digital tools that then are our representers in the negotiation as robots. No, digital tools which help people to better prepare for their negotiation, because they act like, let's say, online coaches, asking the right questions on the power matrix, asking the right questions on what negotiation issues should be negotiated, and thereby, of course, because it's digital, always doing the interlogics and the interconnections between the tools. And just that you have an impression, and I go very fastly over these slides, very easy software applications. So, for example, in the smart objective analysis, asking you what issues are mandatory you should negotiate about. Are there optional issues? What is the ranking? So what issue is more or less important for the other side? And then coming with concrete implications. So for example, with which issues to remain really stable and not to give in, but which are issues, the green part here in this slide, where you should do a concession, where you should move to the other side, and therewith guiding you smartly through a highly cognitive process in order that actually your preparation is guided and therewith most efficient and most effective. Research has shown, and this is just one research we did, but there are also many other institutes which are working on it, that people who get trainings, just general negotiation trainings, of course, improve their negotiation performance. People who are guided with concrete tools, so a little bit what some of you might have heard with the NAP, they even negotiate better. And now, interestingly, people who even have a digital application because it's so efficient and effective. You're just doing the right things, maybe because you forget about them, training contexts, are even negotiating better. But interestingly, again, it's a long way to get companies there, because many companies still think, okay, negotiation, this is a little bit a soft skill competence. We are getting there a little bit, and we are getting to the fact that companies acknowledge sometimes it's worth really gaining competences and skills in the area of negotiation, training people here, looking not only on cost reduction possibilities, but also on negotiation performance increase possibilities. This is what we see, for example, and these are now German magazines, I know it, but they were so illustrative, and this is why I chose them. This is what we see, for example, on the fact that many business administration magazines, like the Harvard Business Manager, are really tackling the issue of negotiation. So we see that there is a rising awareness in practice, and that people acknowledge, okay, we have to do here something. But what we also see is sometimes the staircase is pretty steep, And what we always recommend for practice is, first of all, if you think, okay, actually, Uta, I don't know so quite well how good we are, maybe start with some kind of SWOT analysis, with some inventory on how good is the negotiation performance within your company. And then ask yourself maybe in which phase you need most help. Is it more in the case of organization or preparation? So actually, what is the area your people need most support? And then train people, give them also advice and coach them through their real cases, maybe on behalf of a software. And in the very end, and this is not only the dream of a German professor, in the end, sometimes it's good, whether you call it a center of excellence, but at least that there is somebody who is responsible and who is responsible for sustainably holding negotiation knowledge in the company. And I know it, meanwhile, from several procurement organizations. And I can freely speak about that. From Airbus to Roche to BMW, they all now install competence centers for negotiation where they train multipliers in order that also negotiations become a management process. This is also what not only my institute at university, but also the NAP is every day working on on behalf of meanwhile more than 20 doctoral students, we really try to raise awareness for the issue, empower companies and students, of course, and support them in the implementation of trainings, coachings, and competence centers. And maybe this was also an impulse for you to look upon what you are doing there. And if you have any further questions, you also get the presentation. I will send it here to this beautiful organization team you have in Malaga. And feel free to contact me whenever you have any kind of interest or question. Thank you very much. Enjoy Malaga. I would love to be with you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Uta. Thank you for joining us. We'll let you get back to your faculty meeting. I'll be in touch. We'll see if this has generated some new enthusiasm, and we hopefully can run another course with you later in the year. So I'll be in touch. Thanks, Uta.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So next, I would like to go from negotiations to lashings, and we're going to speak with Thorsten Ludwig from TÜV Süd, who I hope is with us. Are we there? Ah, excellent. Good morning, both of you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
You hear me, I hear you, so you can't see the room, but we have a full room here in Malaga, so thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you.
What's it? Hello.
Yeah. So let's start. Dear members, first my name is Sylvia from the TÜV Süd department for load securing in Germany, and we are speaking here from our premises in Metelen. And first of all, I would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to give you a brief overview of the project of the working group regarding load securing for trucks and passenger cars on vehicle transporters. As Mr. Thorsten Ludwig, he's the head of the load securing department of TÜV Süd, does not speak English very well. I have the honor today to present to you the work of our team from TÜV Süd and of course the members of the working group. So just to get a little impression of our work regarding this project, I would like to share a short video with you. So we would like to introduce the members of the working group who joined this project. In 2016, a working group was set up under the direction of TÜV Süd to study the existing load securing in the area of car and truck transport. And in order to be able to create an adequate load securing system for vehicles, a work group was built from the most diverse areas of car and truck transport, including, for example, commercial vehicle manufacturers or forwarding companies, also manufacturers of securing equipment, and TÜV Süd as a testing organization. So, in order to be able to make precise statements about how cars and trucks are to be secured on a vehicle transporter, the individual levels or important points that could have an influence on load securing were determined and considered. Basically, the load securing was divided into its individual elements in order to find out which factors have an influence. This includes actually the vehicle body. An extremely important value here is the friction coefficient between the rams and the tires. We carried out hundreds of static tests in order to determine a minimum friction value. Another very important value is the load capacity of the fixing points in the rams. So these values were first determined in static tensile tests and then validated with dynamic driving tests. This revealed that the fixing points are the main factor for load securing. So it is certainly possible to reduce load securing devices, but in most cases this reduction leads to an increase in the forces on the fixing points at the rams, so that this could cause an overload. Furthermore, the load capacity of the wheel chocks in combination with the rams was determined in static tests and validated also in dynamic tests. The result was that the wheel chock should not be considered as a single component, but always in combination with the ramp. In order to be able to make a classification in the dynamic driving tests according to vehicle weight, we first had to specify the vehicle position on the transport vehicle, the number of wheel chocks, and also the number of web lashings, the tensioning elements used, including the anti-slip device. In order to be able to determine also the STF value, so the standard tension force, extensive dynamic driving tests were carried out not only on the test site of TÜV Süd, but also during long-term tests on public roads. Like, for example, validation runs of 400 kilometers were carried out in order to see the extent to which the STF value decreases during the transport. All these points were verified by static and dynamic test series, and from these test series, test procedures and testing machines were developed by the working group in order to be able to determine these values reproducibly. The aim of this immense effort over the last 6 years was to look at the transport of passenger cars and trucks in such a detail so that the existing VDI 27008.1 and 8.2 could be reviewed. So the revision of this guideline should be completed and published by the end of 2022, so still this year. And in addition to that, the results shall be submitted to the corresponding European committees after the creation of a guideline in Germany in order to develop then a European standard for the transport of passenger cars and trucks. We tried to keep the load securing measures determined as simple as possible. So this resulted in the following key points regarding transport of passenger cars. The first point is that in total, we only have 6 loading patterns for the entire load securing from 0 up to 4.5 tons vehicle weight. The second point is the reduction in the number of loading pictograms, which is mainly based on the result that the direction of travel of the loaded vehicle is not important. And the third point is that the loading securing refers to the mass of the loaded vehicle as well as to the angle of the ramps. And the last point is that the load securing is also based on the load capacity of the fixing points in the ramps. So we try to create pictograms that are clear and easy to understand in order to support the loading staff in their work, and showing also clear must be placed and which are required. The load securing indications have been divided into 4 sub-ranges. So the first sub-range is which you are seeing right now, 0 to 1.5 tons mass of the loaded vehicle. The second is 0 up to 2 tons mass. The third one is more than 2 up to 3 tons, and the fourth is more than 3 up to 4.5 tons mass of the loaded vehicle. So as you can see from the pictograms, the load securing measures differ in 2 points. The first one is the angle of the ramps, plus minus 10 degrees or maximum plus minus 25 degrees. The second point is the last position on the transport vehicle, which in the case of a combination with a trailer, it means the last position on the trailer, and in case of a single vehicle, loading patterns number 2, 3, and 4 shall only be applied if loading pattern number 1 cannot be applied. So this refers, for example, to the first position above the driver. Loading pattern number 4 is applied, for example, if no wheel chock can be placed. The load securing of 0 up to 2 tons is similar to the already described load securing of 0 to 1.5 tons and differs only in the capacity of the fixing points on the rams of 700 decanewton at 0 and 45 degrees and 600 decanewton at 90 degrees. Only loading pattern number tons. So in this case, it does not matter if the rams are inclined up to a maximum of plus minus 25 degrees. 700 and 600 decanewtons applies. And for the last position, loading pattern number 5 applies as already before. For vehicles with more than 3 up to 4.5 tons, loading pattern number 5 applies for all loading positions. So these vehicles shall not be inclined over the ramps as the lashing point capacities in this weight range get so high that they are higher than 700 decanewton. At this point, it must also be mentioned that special solutions such as higher load capacities in the lashing points in the ramps are certainly allowed. However, in our opinion, these things must be verified by performing dynamic driving tests. The load securing suggestions made here can therefore certainly be complemented by further tests. So it was not the aim of the working group to exclude special solutions or also innovations, but rather to find generally binding solutions that can be implemented with transport vehicles and securing devices available on the market. In order to be able to take the necessary precautions regarding transport vehicles and load securing equipment for the upcoming load securing requirements, we have summarized the most important points for the transport of passenger cars on the following 2 pages. So we distinguish between changes relating to the transport vehicle and changes regarding the load securing equipment. So here are the important points for the transport vehicle. The friction coefficient between car tires and rams must be at least 0.4. The lashing point capacity must be at least 500 decanewton for vehicles with an unladen weight of up to 1.5 tons, and from an unladen weight of more than 1.5 up to 4.5 tons, a lashing point capacity of between 600 and 700 decanewton is required at different lashing angles. Also, the wheel chocks used must be able to apply a horizontal force of at least 500 decanewton, and the body stability must be able to transfer the applied securing forces into the body structure when fully loaded. All these specifications shown must be verified by the manufacturer or, for example, by TÜV Süd. And as these specifications are verified by conducting testing procedures, it is certainly an advantage to find out in advance to what extent vehicles already in use comply with the new requirements so that any necessary steps can be taken in this regard in time. It is mandatory that the polyester web lashings used must comply with the following points. So the standard to be applied is the DIN EN 1295-2, with an elongation less than or not exceeding 4%, a lashing capacity of 1,500 decanewton, the STF value of 330 decanewton, also the eta value, which shall be 0.5 or more than that, is a transmission value which indicates how much force of the web lashing must be transmitted via the wheel. So this value must also be labeled on the web lashing and also on the anti-slip device. Another point is that the tensioning ratchet triple secured is required and the webbing width of at least 35 millimeters. The specifications already described for car transport also have been determined for truck transport by the working group. So here you can see an example for the load securing of vehicles up to 8 tons. At this point, it is important to mention that there is a clear difference in the lashing point capacity for inclined and non-inclined vehicles. In this context, we speak of inclined vehicles from an angle of more than 10 degrees. As you can see from the pictures, and as already mentioned for the case of loading passenger cars, the loading direction of the truck is not relevant. This means that the different loading graphs have been reduced to a minimum. So at this point, in order not to go into much more technical details, TÜV Süd has prepared a leaflet which will be provided to the ECG in the coming days, so that this already may answer some questions that may possibly arise afterwards. Of course, also we, the load securing department of TÜV Süd, will also be at your disposal to answer any question you may have. In order to be able to take the necessary steps regarding transport vehicles and load securing equipment for the upcoming load securing requirements in the area of truck loading, we have also summarized the most important points for the transport of trucks and on the following 2 slides. So here we can see that one of the most important points regarding the transport vehicle is that the friction coefficient between truck tires and rams must be at least 0.5. The lashing point capacity must be at least 1,000 decanewtons when loading a truck with an unladen weight of up to 11 tons and a maximum loading angle of 10 degrees. From a loading angle of more than 10 degrees and a maximum unladen weight of the truck of 11 tons, the lashing points at different angles must be 1,400 up to 1,500 decanewton. From an unladen weight of more than 11 and up to 20 tons, a lashing point capacity of 1,000 decanewton is required, as from 11 tons, a maximum angle of 10 degrees is possible. A higher loading angle would require significantly higher lashing point forces than 1,500 decanewton. Also here, the wheel chocks used must be able to apply a horizontal force of at least 1,500 decanewton. And also in this case, the stability of the body must be designed to be able to transfer the applied securing forces into the body structure when fully loaded. Also, these specifications described here must be verified by testing procedures carried out by the manufacturer or, for example, by TÜV Süd. Therefore, it is certainly advantageous also here to find out in advance to what extent the vehicles already in use meet the new requirements, in order to perhaps initiate, if necessary, the required measures to update. So here it is also absolutely mandatory that the polyester web lashings used must comply with the following points. So again, we have the standard to be applied of DIN EN 1295-2. The elongation stays less than or equal 4%. The lashing capacity is here 2,500 decanewton. We have the STF value of 500 decanewton. And again, the eta value, which shall be 0.5 or more than that, as already indicated before. This must be also labeled on the web lashing and on the anti-slip device. Another point is again the tensioning ratchet triple secured, and the webbing width shall be at least 50 millimeters. So for any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact us directly by phone or by mail, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, both of you. And so the message is make sure you're buying lashings compliant with the future rules. So thank you very much indeed. We're running a bit over time, so we're going to say goodbye to you. I'm sure we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I would like to introduce somebody who we've been working with for a year and I only met for the first time today. Sifis is from the European Maritime Safety Agency, and we've been working with him and his working group on the rules for handling alternative fuel vehicles. So he's going to tell you something about the results of this working group. Sifis, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Indeed, it has been a pleasure working with you throughout this, it has been one and a half year period. Right, there it is. So I'm Sifis Papageorgiou. I'm working as a senior project officer for the European Maritime Safety Agency. So this is slightly out of let's say, the main focus of this world in a sense. But the main reason that I'm here are events like this. I will not say this specific event, but events like these. And especially because of the Felicity Ace incident that I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with. Earlier this year, we had statements such as that traditional water extinguishers do not stop lithium-ion batteries from burning. And then some other statements earlier that month saying that EVs pose different dangers and also the consequences are potentially more severe. Well, to be honest, we at EMSA have been working with fire safety very, very intensely since 2015 from a regulatory point of view, but also investing a lot in research. And I would say, for example, in relation to the first statement here, that, well, you know, just 3 years before this, there was the Sincerity Ace incident, which led to also the loss of 5 crew members, and the ship was burning for much longer. And there were obviously no electrical vehicles involved. So we do not think necessarily that such an incident or the severity of such an incident is linked to electrical vehicles. But of course, after doing a lot of research, we do recognize that indeed the risks of EVs and the measures that need to be taken are different. So what kind of actions have been taken from a regulatory point of view? This has been quite a process, not as long as you might think, perhaps, because as a matter of fact, some EU member states, administrations and stakeholders came to the European Commission, and we as the European Maritime Safety Agency, we worked directly with the European Commission and brought this up and said, look, we are transporting more and more EVs, and we are being asked a lot of questions, and we don't know what to do with these. We don't know we don't have regulations, and we want you to do something about it. Then towards the late 2020, it was decided that EMSA was tasked with drafting some sort of guidance. And this was decided because it was also seen that a sort of global regulatory framework, which is, of course, the goal, would take so much longer that we would be too late in this whole process. So this led then to us forming a consultation group. I will say some more things about it later. And we worked really hard within this consultation group, and we finalized this guidance, this document, in February 2022, so some months ago. And now we're just going through some bureaucratic hurdles. And hopefully, I was actually hoping to be able to announce here today that we have published. Unfortunately, it's not the case. Bad luck. Hopefully next week, which is something I have been saying for some weeks now, so I should probably stop. But what is also important to note here, and regardless of the guidance, is that at IMO, the International Maritime Organization, it has been decided that there will be an agenda item, so meaning they will start discussions on this item in 2023. But we are talking about a period then of 4 years of discussions, so until 4 sessions. This means 2026 to be finalizing, to enter into force in 2028, and usually such regulations would affect only new ships starting or having their keel laid after that date. And obviously the problem is here now. So regarding this consultation group, when we kicked off, we started discussions, okay, what should we include? And therefore it was decided to include both passenger ships and cargo ships, both Ro-Ro cargo ships and PCTCs. There are a lot of risk assessment elements there. Of course, as a guidance, it has a recommendatory nature, so it's not mandatory. There are a lot of operational elements for which we are also quite proud, and this has been the result of working a lot with operators. And I say we are proud because I think also that on a regulatory basis and in our past, we haven't been that great in introducing operational elements in such documents. And we encompass all AFVs, so not only EVs, but also gas vehicles. We try at least. And one very basic element here has been that we wanted the document to be based on actual research, so not on things or fears that we have heard or obvious things, but we also wanted to introduce elements based on testing of some research institutes of actually putting vehicles on fire and also putting them on fire, but also within the context, within the maritime context. So not in the open where there is a lot of good access, where possibly the fire extinguishing systems can be different, but really in confined spaces, and try to see what kind of results we have. There is a lot of research that has taken place, but also a lot of research that is still ongoing, and we do expect more results from that research, which is the reason why we also foresee that we will be updating this document in regular intervals. So we are also very happy about the composition of this group. There were some maritime administrations, there were quite a few ship operators representing both RoPax, so passenger ships, but also PCTCs, some of the members present here, or some of the members of ECG, but of course ECG as well helped us a lot with a lot of valuable input. We also had research institutions participating, and this led to this document in principle that is awaiting publication. It has a structure that it has 3 parts: a generic part with general information and the whole approach and objective of the document in the beginning. 1 part that is dedicated on RoPax, and a 2nd part dedicated on Ro-Ro cargo and PCTCs. And we also have some annexes, and I mentioned them here because I personally think that there is a lot of good work that has been put in these annexes, work related to the operational measures that I mentioned. So the purpose of those annexes is really to provide good information to the crew members in particular regarding the actions that they need to take in relation to the different AFVs. I will focus today only on the Ro-Ro cargo ships and PCTCs because I think this is the most relevant part for this audience. So just the main highlights of what we have in the guidance. We do see, for example, the need to have some sort of facility of identifying the vehicles. And I know this was already discussed today, but we do see that there are a lot of benefits from doing so. There are some conditions of carriage. These are also related to the IMDG code, which is a different, a different instrument, but there are some requirements there. For example, not allowing damaged vehicles or damaged batteries into the ships. And we know that the implementation of that a lot of times is very difficult. It's very difficult to control 4,000 vehicles and expect that they're not damaged. But the recommendation in the guidance is there and is actually based on a requirement. We do have a maximum state of charge requirement, or a recommendation, I should say. And this was based on input that we got from UECC, as a matter of fact, but we also realized that this is something that is common practice among OEMs as well, with different values and dependent also on the route and a lot of other parameters, but still we thought that it is important to introduce something like this. There are some elements on low ground clearance and also charging that we say should not be permitted. I have to note here that, especially regarding charging, this is different in the RoPax ships, where we say that it should not be permitted unless, and then there is a number of, issues that you need to tackle under a risk assessment, and then you may charge. I would say that these measures that need to be taken are also based on research or based on the Albero project, and are quite strict, or much stricter than land-based charging stations. So we try to really manage the risk that we have there on charging. Finally, when it comes to fire suppression and extinguishment, I think that this is a particularly pertinent and still problematic issue. To be honest, we did not have research available at the time, or we still don't, to suggest that the fixed system should be changed in any way. I think this is a longer process and more testing is needed, but we do see several issues with the fixed systems. But we did introduce an emergency response procedure with the guidelines that are included in the annex that I mentioned. Also, there are some recommendations on fire suits and specifications to be more aligned with land-based fire suits, because this is not the case at the moment in the maritime world. Right, and with that, and I know I tried to also make it short, we were running a bit over time, so some concluding remarks. As I said, we need the research, and we are very glad and lucky. We have been lucky. There is a big EU-funded project called Lashfire that is still ongoing. It is expected to be finalized in 2023. There's a lot of good information that we have gotten from them, but of course we expect even more, which means that there might also be some changes in the guidance in the next revision. We also see that the global regulatory process is just starting. So as I mentioned, in IMO, so the International Maritime Organization, this will take some time. In Europe, we will try to have this guidance as a standard, and I know it is expected. As a matter of fact, I'm receiving emails well, I think only this week I have received 5 different emails from people asking, so what about the guidance? When is it going to be published? I should stop answering. And as I said, yes, I still commit that it will be published in the coming weeks. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much.